Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be joined today by Sean McIntyre, who is the first employee of DBT in Europe, a solutions architect. He's actually based in Vienna, like me. And I'm super happy to talk to Sean about DBT, data transformation in the cloud, the ongoing cloud wars, and anything data related. Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Karl. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you.
Great. You just came back from the Snowflake Summit in San Francisco. What are the interesting things that you can share with the audience that you saw there in terms of announcements, in terms of DBT corporations, etc.?
Yeah, that's right. I was last week in San Francisco at Snowflake Summit. 16,000 people or more were there at the Moscone Center in downtown San Francisco. The energy was palpable. It was exciting. Lots of keynotes, one pretty much every day. Karl, I think you were there last year, right?
I was at every one of them except this year's summit. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know it. You know the feeling. It's exciting, and you actually pointed out a few things for me because it was my first time going. But at DBT Labs, that's one of our premier events of the year to meet people and to tell them about DBT. We had not one but two booths there. We were a double black diamond sponsor, so the highest tier of sponsorship. We had one of the largest booths that was continuously busy. That's where I spent the majority of my time, just hanging out, talking to people, whether they're new to DBT or they're interested in it, or they're already users or customers of ours. I was given lots of demos and just talking about how to solve problems, really, which was exciting. For us at DBT Labs at the Snowflake Summit, we announced our DBT Cloud Snowflake app. It's a native app available on the marketplace in Snowflake. It's really exciting for us to have this launch at Snowflake and to show users and people how to get started quickly with DBT by going in the marketplace. It's running on the Snowflake or the Snowpark container services. So the application itself is within Snowflake and Snowpark. And with that app, we had a couple of new features. One called Ask DBT. It's kind of a natural language interface to your data. I think there's lots of those options out there, but what differentiates ours is that we have all the DBT context about the data, which maybe I'll get into later in the podcast is talking with you, Karl. But when you use DBT, you create a lot of context about data that's being made in Snowflake and other databases. So that information can be fed into the LLM and make a more accurate, less hallucination approach to querying data with natural language. And also we have our built-in orchestrator inside of the Snowpark container services. And also just a simple thing, but it's using the Snowflake marketplace in order to procure DBT is a big feature that comes along with having this Snowflake app. But maybe the personal highlight for me at Snowflake Summit, I led a hands-on lab session. Over just under 500 people showed up, and we went through how to build a data mesh with Snowflake and DBT Cloud. 90-minute session, and yeah, we got some people really trying out the technology. We talked about why you might want to consider building a data mesh in your organization. What are the challenges of monolithic systems, and then how to use these tools in order to make these interoperable, federated, self-service applications to empower people to transform data within their own domains. And then there was also a lot of fun too. It was a lot of business, a lot of talking, a lot of nerding out about technology. But Karl, you pointed me at the low-key data happy hour, which I was glad to go to. So thanks for that.
By Ethan Aaron, yeah. Cheers to Ethan.
Yeah, Exactly. I didn't meet him, but Scott Brightonauthor, who's Brooklyn Data Company, introduced me to DBT like 5 or 6 years ago. So he's like my mentor, and he was one of the sponsors of that event. And I saw other celebrities in the data space. Joe Rice, I saw him there. The Seattle data guy, I saw him at the bar. And I got to play some pinball, which was just like a really fun thing to do after a day of talking about data, just to kind of focus on the pinball machine and play on that, and to kind of wind down before the next day of excitement. So overall, it was a lot of business, a lot of connecting with people, which I love doing, and yeah, looking forward to next year.
Great, and yeah, congrats on the data mesh workshop. I'm super happy to hear that data mesh is starting to be in again. Kind of the Gen AI stole the thunder a little bit, but now we're seeing more and more people are saying, okay, what are we doing? Our data domains, are building data mesh? How are we doing it? I think this going back to business with data mesh is a welcome change from, okay, we have to do Gen AI for everything now.
Yeah, and actually one of our taglines for this whole conference was AI runs on data and data runs on DBT. So we're trying to connect our story of enabling teams to own and create clean, trustworthy data sets, and that being important and a necessary precursor to having AI in an organization.
For our audience that might be more on the management side, can you please explain what's DBT, why is it so important, and on the one hand, who's using it as open source, and why should enterprises consider using the DBT in the cloud?
Yeah. So right from the beginning, DBT, we call it the T in ELT, right? Extract, load, transform. The idea is you have data, it's in your database, in your Snowflake or your Databricks, and how do you unlock that data? DBT helps you unlock that data and helps drive insights and analytics at an organization. You can think of it as a collaboration platform. It is a platform that you can provide to your data people, your data engineers, your data scientists, your data analysts, in order to create long-lasting projects of business logic that takes source systems, right? Source data sets, ERPs like SAP or CRMs like Salesforce, marketing data sets from like Facebook or Google or whatever advertising platform, IoT data that might be coming from manufacturing equipment. That data is loaded into the database. And the goal that typically organizations have is to get that to power reports, dashboards, machine learning training, push that data out to other systems. How do you get from the raw, messy part of data to driving insights and delivering business value, right? Whether it could be ensuring that your revenue is meeting the targets you have in your organization, or making sure you're as efficient as you want to be, or that your advertising campaigns are reaching the right audience. That might be like your business goal, and getting the data nice, clean, conformed within the database to power those applications to help you reach those goals. That's what DBT does. It lets teams collaborate to make those data sets for the applications you have.
Right. But from, let's say, timeline perspective and how these things develop, why is it so important that in the way, when you're democratizing data and how it's used in a company, to decouple the business logic, or to have the ability to decouple writing the business logic from the classical database team that used to write SQL transformations by hand, or use some of these on-premise tools for ETL? Why is this so important to have this ability to decouple the business logic writing and enable business owners to do it if they wish to do so?
Yeah, like what tie it back to when it was in my last job 4 or 5 years ago. When I was in that job, we were the data team, and we were providing the analytics and the data insights. Teams would send us requests, and they would send us projects, right? And would go into our Jira queue, and then we would have to prioritize that and decide centrally which projects got to be created, which we invested into. That meant that many of the projects didn't get done, or they got done very slowly because we were a bottleneck, right? Our team as data engineers were bottlenecks. And that's because it's expensive and it requires a team of skilled engineers with 5-10 years of experience to be productive and to deliver these long-lasting data projects. And I think the innovation that dbt has brought is it lowers the playing field to building data sets and transforming data, because it's just plain SQL select statements. And so that means if you just have 1 year of experience of working with data, you can use dbt to build your data sets. And that allows the teams themselves, if they say it's a marketing team or a sales team or a finance team, to start using Snowflake, to start using Databricks, to start using the very powerful cloud data platforms they have in the organization with a much simpler interface, rather than having to know Python and Scala, these like complicated things that someone who's studied computers for 5-10 years can do, and bring that ability to the people who are interested and want to produce and own and maintain their own data sets. And the other aspect of dbt that's very innovative is that it forces those people sitting in the business, the finance team, to use software engineering principles, to use source control, to test their data, to document their data, to have lineage, and to understand where the data is coming from and where it's going to. dbt makes it easier to participate, but then provides a framework that's like software development to building that. And that implies quality, that implies visibility, observability, understanding of the data. And ultimately, like when going back to my own story of my last job, when I was building data sets and delivering projects, I would regularly get interrupted through my sprint process to answer questions about the data sets I built or to fix them. And with dbt, it's a more of a self-service approach where people who have questions can be pointed at the documentation. They can look for themselves and answer for themselves what the data is that they're using. And so that ultimately makes the teams who use dbt in building data transformations more productive, make them more reliable because they're meeting their sprint schedules, and then also allows more people to participate in the process of building and creating data sets, so that the whole organization is using data for their purposes to meet their goals, right? What the very goals that each team will have. And that implies the business will benefit, because when you use data, you should have a better understanding of your progress towards your goals, and that will make you more successful in reaching those goals.
Right. So it's on the one hand, you obviously have increased productivity, right? Just increasing the quality of life for existing developers and enabling new developers, including from business units, to be able to do these transformations, to build their data sets and deploy them in a more pipeline controlled way into the cloud platforms is one side. But then the other side you're saying is or let's put it this way. This is the one aspect of it. And the other aspect is how do you move from an existing legacy infrastructure the way it was, as you mentioned, 4, 5, 10 years ago, which many organizations that still have a lot of their reporting, dashboarding come out of databases on on-premise systems. We definitely have that in Europe, a lot of it. With a tool like dbt, you can pretty much be set up to utilize this new practices into the cloud right off the bat. But then this also feels like you can't do that unless you really commit into going to the cloud. So there's a bit of a dilemma that at least I observe here in Europe, saying, well, it feels like we're not just trying to use a new tool, but kind of switch the entire way the company works with data, which this new tooling implies. So it changes a lot more than just, you can use one more tool. If you switch to these new practices, like version controlled, tested, SQL generated code when creating new data sets. Do you think how do you see this challenge playing out in Europe for the customers that we have here in Europe, for the, let's say, legacy data teams? How would you advise them to go about starting to use dbt into their landscapes?
Yeah, really good question. I think it goes down to the challenges that the organization is facing when I speak with them. Perhaps they're not facing any challenge, and then it's hard to make an argument why they should make a change. But challenges that are typical are costs are increasing because, especially with like an on-premise system, you need to procure more hardware in order to handle the ever-increasing volume of data and data demand for analytics. And that grows, let's say, for a typical business, 30, 40% year over year. And that means more purchasing, more hardware. And sometimes the reality is there's a shift outside of Europe, let's say in America, where people are moving to the cloud, and so there's less demand for the on-premise systems, and those systems get more and more expensive to maintain. And then the cost proposition of a cloud-based system suddenly becomes very attractive to some organizations. They realize that rather than procuring hardware, a migration to a cloud data platform like Snowflake or Databricks or BigQuery could overall save them money, just practically speaking. Because at the end of the day, that's, I think, we're all in business, and that's what drives a lot of decision making, is how do we improve our revenue? How do we improve the bottom line? And,
right.
and part of that can be, make the cloud becoming just more an attractive financial proposition.
Right. Plus, if you had like already in place and a very experienced team that has no trouble, integrating, data as the business moves along, and for them, they already don't need for it to be any simpler. Let's put it this way: they can already manage. But then, improving their quality of life. So there's a monetary value on them being more effective, being more productive, being spread out in the business. So enabling that is a key message, right, to management, to say, look, as you inevitably are going to move into the cloud, also in Europe, here's a way for your data engineering team to just be more productive, right, to be able to do more with less time. And I think that's why an understanding on the management side of things for those technologies is super important.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other big aspect of it, because companies have a lot of payroll allocated towards engineers, making sure that they're staffed appropriately. So how can you get more out of them? How can you be more efficient about it? Some organizations I work with choose to use dbt Cloud as the front end to their database, right? Because if the organization were using, say, Snowflake directly, there is a very big range of possibilities of how to build and manage data sets inside of Snowflake. If you have 100 people using that interface, you could have 100 different solutions on how data is built and maintained. With DBT, the interface is much simpler, and there's more of a prescribed way of how to do things. And so you'll have less variability. And if you needed to pull in more people into a project in order to make it go faster, then it conceivably could happen with a DBT route due to the modularity that's built in, due to the documentation that the engineers must do as they're building out their projects, due to the built-in lineage to understand how data flows from the sources to the end system. And so the time to entry for a new person to a DBT project is typically much lower than it is to a Python project, to it is to a Spark project, to it is to a set of stored procedures. That's a big proposition of ours, right? And that when people see that and experience that, that's what they get excited for.
Right. Essentially, simplicity and standardization are good core values, and managers should definitely be aware of, especially around legacy technologies, around existing overcomplicated, overly technical solutions that should just be retired, right, and modernized for something more standard and more simple, and in line with the cloud data management practices, really, like DBT is. What do you think about having, in a data world, like in the old school world, we used to have okay, you buy your database licenses, you have your one-off fees, and you run your hardware. But then now everything is more subscription based, consumption based, changing from capex to opex. Is it a bad thing? How does DBT Cloud view this, and why chose the model that you guys chose for your product?
Yeah, good question. So historically, DBT Cloud, which is our cloud-based enterprise offering of DBT, and to put that in context, DBT is an open source project that was started 8 or 9 years ago, where you could only install it via the command line. And DBT Labs, we recently rebranded, I think 3 years ago, from our original name as a consulting firm to DBT Labs, because our focus became building out the DBT Cloud product, a cloud-based approach to DBT, to provide DBT as a service throughout an organization that's scalable and governable and secure. And so when we did that, the natural starting point was the license-based model of having organizations pay per user using the platform. And more recently, we have shifted towards more of a consumption-based model, where some smaller component of the contract is consumption or usage of DBT, and that for DBT means successful models built, so number of successful transformations executed on the database. So there is a shift on our side, and obviously on top of Snowflake and top of Databricks, they're fully consumption, BigQuery, fully consumption based models of using the data. Being part of my job being selling DBT Cloud Enterprise, it makes a lot of sense, because going back to what I said a few minutes ago, we're really looking to add value and figure out how to help organizations unlock value and get something out of using DBT, like meeting their business goal. It's not about using technology. It's about helping an organization be better, to hit their revenue targets, to make sure they're running at the efficiency that they want. And tying in the consumption story to the value story, I think, is a good one, because then you can start making business arguments about why it makes sense to be using certain technologies and tying that to certain business goals. One thing I heard, I like this from a colleague, a Snowflake sales engineer I met last week in San Francisco, was one thing that has become really clear is that the let's say Snowflake specifically, you have a lot more visibility into how much it costs to run the platform, right? You used to not have a very clear idea. If you have the server room and you have 10 server racks crunching data 24/7, that is a lump sum bill paid to central IT, or paid by central IT.
Right.
And not having any kind of visibility into what let's say if there's 10 use cases running on that, or how much each of those costs. But now with the cloud technology, you do have more and more understanding of assigning spend of compute and data resources on specific projects. And that's scary, I think, especially as an engineer, because it's something that never really needed to be considered. It only really needed to deliver value, and to deliver value efficiently, computationally efficiently. And now there's that cost element to it. So it makes the engineer's job harder, but that accountability and governability goes down further, even to the point where I hope one day in Snowflake and other platforms, you can have a piece of metadata that says how much each query costs. And once you have that data, then on the dbt cloud side, we can understand how much a particular job costs. And when you know how much a job costs, then you can assign that to a project, and you can really make a clear ROI argument towards running data and building data sets to the impact and to the value. And I think that is better for business. It is scary, especially on the engineer side. But as a manager or director, that's something that you may want, actually.
You may want it very high up on at the management level, but then once you get down into the details of it, it's pretty obvious that let's say the business departments didn't plan for a particular budget. If that's going to be allocated to them, it's pretty obvious that the switch from capex to opex only has an impact in accounting, and also the way that do FinOps and you manage this cloud spend is new for many legacy organizations. That doesn't mean it's bad or they have negative elements of it. It's just that they have to very consciously approach this, and it's not like in the old ways where you just have like this cost allocated to IT running some infrastructure that you don't care about in your particular division, but more like having a bit of a visibility of who's using what and how to enable everyone while still controlling the costs and having accountability. It is definitely a challenge. But ultimately, I believe that it is the better thing to do, and it gives also the much better the ability to control for costs in a downturn, where you could just while knowing full well what produced the majority of the cost, you can actually aim for savings in downturns, and at the same time be bolder at boom times, and invest in R&D or product development, marketing, what have you. What's driving the cost for something like Snowflake or dbt up? So it's very hard to make the argument that for the company it's a bad thing. So yeah. By the way, my camera battery ran out, and so switched to my camera. I hope you can see me.
Oh yeah, we can see you just
from the laptop camera.
I was wondering where you went for a sec.
Yeah.
You did not something I said then, so you didn't run away.
No. It's just it's just that the camera ran out. What do you think? Just before we wrap up, you see this ongoing, Snowflake versus Databricks thing. That's I think now stronger than ever. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, that DBT has investment both from Snowflake and Databricks, and that you guys work very well with both major platforms and others. My personal take is, competition is good for everyone, for the companies, for the consumers, for us as engineers. What's your take on that? And maybe if you can share something based on the very recent announcements at both platforms. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, DBT is a platform agnostic technology, right? So it's managing SQL, it's managing Python code, and that code could be executed on the ones that are offered in cloud and DBT Cloud are Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, Fabric, Microsoft Fabric, Starburst, Redshift, and Postgres. So 7 right now, and also actually Synapse, so 8 Azure Synapse. And then on top of that, the open source version of DBT can also run on Oracle, on Teradata, on Greenplum, on Exasol, on there's probably 10 or 20 more that I'm not listing. What I'm saying is that all of the what all of these have in common are SQL, right? All of these databases have SQL in common. It is the lingua franca of data, as many people have tried to kill it over the last 2 or 3 decades. It's still here. It's still powerful. And DBT is letting organizations use SQL to manage their data. And I think that's really powerful because it means we are in a position at DBT Labs to work with any of the cloud data platforms, Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, and so on, and to offer the ability for teams to manage data sets irrespective of what platform they're on. That's really powerful because there's new technologies that I'm excited for, and I'm sure you are too, Karl, like Iceberg as a data format that is portable across storage layers, and compute can be pointed at this kind of storage. We may see in the next couple of years change the dynamics of the cloud data platform marketplace. And but that was, I think, one of the big announcements in the past week was the acquisition of Tabular by Databricks as I think of them as
super smart move, I might say. Absolutely brilliant move. Yeah.
I think of them as like the Hive Metastore for Iceberg. I don't know if you have an opinion on that. But it just shows that, the database market is exciting right now, because the way that I think about it is Databricks is moving more and more towards Snowflake's the sweet spot and what they started as 10 years ago. And meanwhile, Snowflake is moving more and more towards what Databricks is offering. And it means it's great time for consumers, for organizations to have great options. And I once ran, in my last job, an RFP of trying to select these data platforms that would power our analytics, and it was hard because the pricing models are you got to parse them out and understand what the pricing models mean for your business, and what your workloads might look like, and because when it came down to it, the cost is what mattered on making the decision between the database and which one do we think would cost the least, because their features were all very good. They would all satisfy our needs.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a good time. I'd say it's an exciting time to be in the data space.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would say the companies still have the challenge of data management. Okay. So this has not gone away. Clearly this core functionality is super important for enterprises. And while Databricks wants to do more than just be the ML kind of playground, and is moving more into this cloud warehousing space, while Snowflake is, it seems like, absolutely going into, as you mentioned, into, okay, we do AI as good as anything, right? And you could do all of this fancy AI stuff with us as well. That ultimately, these dynamic developments are happening, but the core demand on the major businesses side, on the enterprises, stays the same. It's not changing. And while things like Iceberg are super important, I also think from a regulatory perspective, the ability to kind of switch and have like an easier exit is super important. One comment on what you mentioned about SQL. I absolutely like SQL is here to stay. It will absolutely outlive us all, and there's a good reason for it. It's robust. It's easy to use. It solves the problem quite well. And while there was this in the early days of Hadoop, where you had big data and SQL wasn't important, it was pretty much obvious for most people in the data business that it's just a fad, and there's going to be a solution at some point that really simplifies the way you'd handle this even very large data sets. You didn't have to write Java code and MapReduce to do something that you can now easily do with the simplest of SQL statements in Snowflake. And so DBT, based off of that underlying SQL premise, is absolutely correct. And as you mentioned, this stack will not change. Where is it going? I also agree. It's good. More competition is good, and the ability to switch the providers of compute can be bad for consumers, and consumers meaning large businesses and small businesses alike. So it's very, very exciting to see this thing moving forward. Can you share one before we wrap this up regarding a few thoughts on where you think corporate data mesh implementations are likely going to go from a very pragmatic standpoint of what you're seeing, especially in our European context here?
Yeah, it sounds good. I can try. I've worked on a number of data mesh projects across Europe. The premise of my hands-on lab at Snowflake Summit was that that the monolithic data structure has some major drawbacks when you start going at scale. Say if you have 20, 30, 50, 100 people working on one data project, they're usually responsible for too much. They're responsible for loading data in from all the sources into the target database. They're responsible for transforming the data, and they're responsible for building the reports and the AI applications and whatnot. And that leads to people being pretty far away from the actual business problem, right? They're not informed about what it is that they're trying to do. They don't have a true understanding of it. And it can be slow because, as I mentioned at the beginning, you can have these teams that become bottlenecks. And also these projects tend to be very messy and difficult to understand. So I mentioned like throwing more people at the project. Like if you try to say, oh, we need this analytical project to go faster, let's just add some consultants. Let's just pull them in and go fast. No offense, Karl. And then sometimes that doesn't work when you have these big, messy, hairy projects that because they're just too difficult to understand. People are afraid to making changes to them. If they make a change, maybe it'll break something completely different unintentionally. The data domains like marketing and sales and finance, they're kind of all intermingled, and there's no clear boundaries and interfaces. So the data mesh approach to enterprise analytics is to empower different teams that are closer to the business problems to use data to meet their needs. And part of that is to allow them to have to build and maintain the interfaces to their data sets and also to have the tools for themselves to be fast and move quickly in order to create and maintain those data sets over time. Because these teams may have their own sprint cycles, they may have their own requirements, they may have like how do they respond to incidents, how do they manage those communications to people who, when something goes wrong about their data sets, how do they tell people? And so what I did in the workshop was showed them how to create data products, which are have a number of different qualities, like they're valuable, they're findable, they're self-documenting, they have high data quality, and when, say, if I'm on a finance team and I build a finance data product, I can pull in the sources of data that I need within my small domain, build the data sets I want, and then share those data sets with other teams. Say if there's like one example is like if I'm responsible for currency conversions on the finance team, I pull in all the information about what the day by day what the currency exchange rates are, and maybe that data set is valuable for some other use case, some sales team or marketing or product team out there. And what I showed in the workshop is you can use dbt Cloud on top of Snowflake to produce those data sets and then share them and make them publicly available and documented, kind of like when you're going to a supermarket. Because the idea, I think, for a data mesh should be that it's experience of going to a supermarket, of going to the right aisle, because you know that aisle has the dairy products or has the jam and being able to pick up a product and understand it, read its labels, clearly see what it is, go in the back, look at the nutrition information, see how healthy it is for you, or what the caveats are of using that data set, how to use it, how to spread it on your toast and whatnot. That's kind of the experience, I think, the successful data mesh projects that I've seen in Europe is having that. Like there's one company I'm thinking in particular who've built out a marketplace. They have an application that allows any user to search for the available data products in their organization, and then they get a description of the data product, say for example like this currency data product, and then they have an ability to ask for approval to use it, and then they have a procedure for approving that and then granting access to the appropriate people. And that goes to the supermarket kind of analogy of being able to understand, observe, and find the products, put it in your shopping cart and check it out and use it for your own purpose. So yeah, that was hopefully a little rambly over there, Karl, but successful data products and data meshes should have that supermarket experience. And what I intended to show last week at Summit was that you can do that with Snowflake and dbt Cloud.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I'll just only add that it's not a virtue in and of itself if you say, well, data mesh supports different technologies. So across the group, let's have 10 technologies and 20 different interfaces because we're so flexible. It just adds cost. And if you have like a good exit strategy, and if you're not overly completely locked in, it makes sense to consolidate as much as possible. I know that goes against the instinct of many teams in distributed organizations, but ultimately, I personally believe this to be the most cost-effective, the more right approach, and certainly using Snowflake and dbt is an excellent way of achieving that.
Yeah, and because one more thought there, like automated compliance. I think when you use these tools, you get automated compliance. A lot of the qualities of a good product you are kind of built into how you build it, and then those teams that are more centrally located who care about governing that the products are good quality, right? If I'm the supermarket manager, I want to make sure I only have the good products on the shelves. You can have that experience as well with these tools. Absolutely.
Sean, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk. Super happy to have you on, and looking forward to meeting you, seeing you again in Vienna. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Karl. See you soon, I hope. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye.